The stagecoach lurched to a stop in front of the Durango saloon, and when the door opened, a woman stepped down into the Colorado dust with nothing but the threadbare dress on her back and a determination in her eyes that could cut through iron. Fiona Jenkins steadied herself against the wooden rail of the boardwalk, her legs trembling from 3 days of travel over rough mountain roads. The afternoon sun beat down mercilessly on the main street of Durango, and she could feel dozens of eyes upon her from every direction. Women in fine dresses whispered behind their hands while men stopped their conversations to stare at the newcomer, who clearly had nothing to her name. She had left Kansas City with only what she wore, fleeing a life that had crumbled around her when her father's debts came due, and the creditors took everything, including the roof over their heads. Her father had died 2 months prior, leaving her alone in the world at 22 years old with no family, no prospects, and no possessions. The ticket west had cost her the last bit of money she had earned working in a boarding house, and now she stood in a town she had never seen, knowing no one, with evening approaching and nowhere to go. "Need help, miss?" A gruff voice came from her left, and Fiona turned to see an older man with a silver badge pinned to his vest. The sheriff looked at her with curiosity but not unkindness. "I am looking for work," Fiona said, lifting her chin despite the exhaustion weighing down her bones. "Any honest work." "I can cook, clean, sew, tend to children, or help in a store." The sheriff scratched his weathered jaw. "Well now, that is a tall order on short notice. Most folks around here got their help already. You got anywhere to stay tonight?" Fiona swallowed hard. "Not yet, but I will find something." "The boarding house down the street might have a room, but it costs money up front," the sheriff said, not unkindly. "You got any money?" "No, sir, but I will earn some." Her voice remained steady even as her heart hammered with growing desperation. "Tell you what," the sheriff said, pulling a coin from his pocket. "Take this and get yourself a meal at the diner. I will ask around about work. Come see me tomorrow morning at my office." Fiona looked at the silver dollar in his outstretched hand and felt her throat tighten. She had never taken charity before, but pride seemed a foolish luxury when hunger gnawed at her stomach. "Thank you, Sheriff. I will pay you back." "I know you will," he said with a nod. "Name's Sheriff Coleman. What is yours?" "Fiona Jenkins." "Welcome to Durango, Miss Jenkins. It is a rough town, but fair to those who work hard." Fiona took the coin and made her way toward the diner, aware that she still had no solution for where she would sleep that night. The September evening would be cold in the mountains, and sleeping on the street seemed both dangerous and desperate. But she had survived worse in recent months, and she would survive this too. The diner was a small establishment with checkered curtains, and the smell of coffee and fried beef hanging in the air. Fiona sat at the counter and ordered the cheapest item on the menu, a bowl of stew and a piece of bread. As she ate slowly, making each bite last, she listened to the conversations around her. "Yates needs help at his ranch," one man said to another. "Lost 2 hands last week when they moved on to the mines." "Yates does not hire women for ranch work," his companion replied. "He runs cattle and horses, needs men who can rope and ride. Shame about his wife passing last year. That place could use a woman's touch again." Fiona's ears perked up at this information, but she said nothing, just continued eating her stew while her mind worked through possibilities. A ranch needing help might mean opportunities beyond just cattle work. Ranches needed cooks, needed someone to tend the house, needed all manner of things. But approaching a rancher about work when she had no references and no possessions seemed unlikely to succeed. She finished her meal as the sun began to set, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple beyond the diner windows. She thanked the woman behind the counter and stepped back onto the street, looking up and down for any sign of where she might spend the night. The boarding house glowed with lamplight, but without money, she could not even approach the front desk. There was a stable at the end of the street, and Fiona made her way toward it, thinking that perhaps she could sleep in the hay loft if the stable owner would permit it. But as she neared the large wooden structure, she heard angry voices coming from inside. "I told you the payment was due last week," a harsh voice shouted. "And I told you I would have it by month's end," another voice replied, younger and steadier. "I do not have it today, and threatening me will not make money appear from thin air. Then maybe I should take one of these horses as collateral." "You will not touch my horses." Fiona hesitated at the stable entrance, uncertain whether she should interrupt or slip away quietly. But before she could decide, a man came stumbling backward through the door, pushed by someone inside. He was tall and lean, probably close to her own age, with dark hair that needed cutting and eyes that flashed with anger in the fading light. "You have 1 week, Yates," the other man called from inside. "1 week, or I take what I am owed." The young man, Yates, steadied himself and brushed the dust from his shirt. His jaw was clenched tight, and Fiona could see the muscles working in his cheek as he controlled his temper. Then his eyes landed on her, and his expression shifted from anger to surprise. "Apologies, miss," he said, his voice suddenly gentle despite the confrontation he had just endured. "You should not have had to witness that unpleasantness." "I did not mean to intrude," Fiona said quickly. "I was only looking for the stable owner." "That would be old Jim, but he has gone to Denver for supplies. Won't be back until tomorrow evening." Yates studied her face in the dimming light, and Fiona saw kindness in his eyes despite the hardness that life had clearly given him. "You are the woman who arrived on the stage today. News travels fast in a small town. Durango is not that small, but yes, word gets around." He glanced back at the stable, then at her again. "You need somewhere to stay." Fiona hesitated, unsure how much to reveal to this stranger. But something in his manner put her at ease, a straightforwardness that seemed honest. "I do, but I have no money to pay for lodging tonight. I was hoping I might sleep in the stable loft." Yates was quiet for a moment, and Fiona prepared herself for rejection. Instead, he said, "I am Yates Jefferson. I have a ranch about 5 miles north of town. It is not much to look at these days, but there is a spare room in the house and a bed that has not been used in months. You are welcome to stay there tonight, no charge." "I could not possibly impose on a stranger like that," Fiona said, even as hope flickered in her chest. "It is no imposition. The house is too big for one person anyway, and it would ease my conscience to know you are safe rather than sleeping in a stable." He paused, then added, "I know what it is like to have nothing. When I was 18, I came west with $50 and a broken wagon. Folks helped me then, and I am just passing that kindness forward." Fiona searched his face for any sign of ulterior motive, but found only sincerity. She had heard stories of women being lured into dangerous situations, but her instincts told her this man meant what he said. And the alternative was spending a cold night in a stable alone, which carried its own risks. "Thank you, Mr. Jefferson. I accept your offer, and I will find a way to repay your kindness. Call me Yates. Mr. Jefferson was my father." He gestured toward a horse tied nearby, a sturdy bay gelding. "We will have to ride double since I only brought one horse to town. Is that acceptable?" "I have ridden before," Fiona assured him, though it had been years since she had been on a horse. Yates untied the horse and mounted smoothly, then extended his hand to help Fiona up behind him. She settled onto the horse's back, trying to find a comfortable position while maintaining a proper distance from Yates. But as the horse began to move, she had to grab onto his waist to keep from sliding off. "Hold on tight," Yates said over his shoulder. The road gets rough once we leave town. They rode through Durango as the last light faded from the sky, and soon they were on a dirt road that wound through pine forests and open meadows. The September air grew cold quickly, and Fiona found herself grateful for the warmth radiating from Yates's body in front of her. She could feel the solid strength of him, the easy way he sat in the saddle, completely at home on horseback. "What brings you to Durango?" Yates asked as they rode. His voice was conversational, not prying. "A need for a fresh start," Fiona answered honestly. "I have nothing left in Kansas City, and I heard there were opportunities in Colorado." "There are opportunities if you are willing to work hard. This territory does not give anything easy, but it is fair to those who earn their keep." He was silent for a moment, then said, "I heard what you told Sheriff Coleman. You are looking for work." "Yes, any honest work." "Can you really cook?" "I can. I worked in a boarding house for 2 years, cooking for 20 men every day. I know my way around a kitchen." Yates seemed to consider this information carefully. "I am not much of a cook myself. Been living on beans and jerky for months now. The ranch hands I had quit last week, heading to the silver mines where they think they will get rich quick. Now it is just me trying to manage 200 head of cattle and a dozen horses. I heard someone mention in town that you needed help." "I need help I cannot afford," Yates said bluntly. "I have had some bad luck lately. Lost part of my herd to illness last spring, and the market price for beef has been down. I am behind on some payments, which is what that scene in town was about tonight. A man I owe money to, and he is losing patience." "How much do you owe him?" Fiona asked, then immediately regretted the forward question. "I apologize, that is none of my business." "It is all right. I owe him $300. I will have it by the end of the month when I sell my horses, but he wants it now." Yates guided the horse around a bend in the road, and Fiona caught her first glimpse of the ranch in the moonlight. A simple wooden house sat in a clearing, with a barn and several corrals visible behind it. It was modest but well maintained, the kind of place built by someone who cared about their land. They dismounted in front of the house, and Yates led the horse to the barn while Fiona waited on the porch. The night was full of sounds she had forgotten from her childhood in rural Kansas: the chirping of crickets, the distant howl of a coyote, the wind moving through the pines. It felt both foreign and familiar at the same time. Yates returned a few minutes later and opened the front door, striking a match to light a lamp inside. The house was simple but clean, with handmade furniture and a stone fireplace that dominated one wall. Fiona could see a kitchen area on one side and 2 doors that presumably led to bedrooms on the other. "The spare room is there," Yates said, pointing to the left door. "It was meant to be a nursery someday, but that never happened. There is a bed and a wash basin. Not fancy, but it is comfortable enough." "It is more than I hoped for this morning," Fiona said gratefully. "Thank you again." Yates nodded and moved to the fireplace, kneeling to build a fire against the evening chill. "I will make us some coffee if you would like. I also have some bread and cheese if you are still hungry." "Coffee would be wonderful." Fiona watched him work, noting the efficient way he stacked the kindling and struck the flint. Everything about him spoke of competence and hard work, from his calloused hands to the worn but well-cared-for clothes he wore. As the fire caught and began to warm the room, Yates moved to the kitchen and prepared coffee in a battered pot. Fiona sat in a wooden chair near the fire, feeling the tension of the day slowly drain from her body. For the first time since leaving Kansas City, she felt safe. "So what happened in Kansas City?" Yates asked as he handed her a cup of coffee. He settled into the chair across from her, cradling his own cup in both hands. Fiona took a sip of the hot, strong coffee before answering. "My father died 2 months ago. He had debts I knew nothing about, gambling debts mostly. The men he owed came and took everything we had, the house, the furniture, everything. I was left with nothing but what I could carry, and even that I had to sell to buy food while I worked and saved for a ticket west. That is rough, Yates said quietly. I am sorry. It is what it is. I cannot change the past, only move forward. She looked at him directly. What about you? How did you end up with a ranch in Colorado? Long story, but the short version is I came west 7 years ago with big dreams and little sense. Worked as a ranch hand for 5 years, saved every penny, and finally had enough to buy this place 3 years ago. It was run down when I got it, but I saw the potential. Good grazing land, water from the creek, close enough to town to sell cattle but far enough out to have space. He paused, staring into the fire. I got married 2 years ago to a woman named Sarah. She died last winter from pneumonia. Since then, it has been hard to keep everything running smoothly on my own. I am sorry for your loss, Fiona said, and meant it. She could hear the pain in his voice when he spoke of his wife. Thank you. Yates finished his coffee and stood. It is late, and you must be exhausted. We can talk more in the morning about work if you are still interested. I might not be able to pay much, but I can offer room and board plus a small wage. I am very interested, Fiona said firmly. I will earn my keep, I promise you that. Yates showed her to the spare room, which was small but clean, with a narrow bed covered in quilts and a window that looked out toward the mountains. A wash basin sat on a small table, and there was even a mirror on the wall, cracked in one corner but still functional. Sleep well, Miss Jenkins, Yates said from the doorway. Please call me Fiona. Sleep well, Fiona. He smiled slightly, the first real smile she had seen from him, and it transformed his face from merely handsome to something that made her heart skip unexpectedly. After he closed the door, Fiona sat on the bed and let herself finally relax. The events of the day washed over her, the long stagecoach ride, the fear of arriving with nothing, the kindness of strangers, and now this unexpected turn of fortune. She did not know what tomorrow would bring, but tonight she had a roof over her head and the promise of work, and that was more than she had hoped for. She lay down on the bed, still wearing her dress since she had no night clothes, and pulled the quilts over her. Through the thin walls, she could hear Yates moving around the house, banking the fire, checking the doors. Then silence fell, and she drifted off to sleep with the sounds of the Colorado wilderness outside her window. Fiona woke to the smell of coffee and the sound of someone moving around in the kitchen. Sunlight streamed through the window, and she sat up quickly, disoriented for a moment before remembering where she was. She had slept later than she intended, and guilt prodded her to get up immediately. If she was going to work here, she needed to prove her worth from the first day. She splashed water on her face from the wash basin and did her best to tidy her hair, which had come loose from its bun during the night. Her dress was wrinkled and dusty from travel, but it was all she had, so she smoothed it down as best she could and stepped out into the main room. Yates stood at the stove, attempting to cook something that looked like eggs but smelled slightly burned. He glanced up when she entered and had the grace to look embarrassed. "Good morning. I was trying to make breakfast, but I am not having much success." "Let me," Fiona said, moving to the stove without hesitation. She looked at the pan and assessed the situation quickly. "These eggs are past saving, but if you have more, I can start fresh. And is that bacon I smell?" "Yes, but it is a bit crispy." "Crispy is a kind word for it," Fiona said with a small smile. "Step aside and let me show you what 2 years in a boarding house kitchen taught me." Yates moved out of her way gladly, and Fiona set to work. She found eggs in a basket, more bacon in the cold box, and some potatoes that could be diced and fried. Within 20 minutes, she had prepared a breakfast that looked and smelled considerably better than Yates's attempt. They ate together at the small table, and Fiona could see Yates's appreciation in the way he cleaned his plate without speaking. When he finally sat back, he said, "That was the best meal I have had in months. If you cook like that every day, I will consider myself lucky." "So I have the job?" Fiona asked, allowing herself to hope. "You have the job. I can pay you $15 a month plus room and board. It is not much, but it is what I can afford right now. Once I sell the horses at the end of the month, I might be able to pay more." "That is more than fair," Fiona said, relief flooding through her. $15 a month was not a fortune, but it was a start, and room and board meant security she had not had in months. "The work will not be easy," Yates warned. "Cooking, cleaning, mending clothes, tending the garden if you know anything about that. Maybe helping with some of the lighter ranch work if you are willing. I will not ask you to do anything dangerous, but extra hands are always useful." "I am not afraid of hard work," Fiona assured him. "When do I start?" "Right now, if you are ready. I need to ride out and check on the cattle in the north pasture. That will take most of the day. While I am gone, you can familiarize yourself with the house and the supplies in the kitchen. There is a root cellar out back with vegetables and preserves. The chickens need feeding, and you can collect eggs if you know how. I grew up on a farm. I know how to handle chickens." "Good." Yates stood and grabbed his hat from a peg by the door. "I should be back before dark." "Make yourself at home, Fiona. This is your house now, too." After he left, Fiona stood in the quiet house and felt a strange mixture of emotions. Relief at having found work and shelter, uncertainty about this new life, and something else she could not quite name when she thought about Yates Jefferson. He was kind and honest, and there was something in his eyes that called to her, a loneliness that matched her own. But she pushed those thoughts aside and focused on the work at hand. She spent the morning exploring the house, taking inventory of the kitchen supplies, and making a list of things that needed attention. The house was clean but neglected, lacking the small touches that made a place a home. The windows needed washing, the floors needed scrubbing, and the curtains were faded and torn in places. She found a broom and set to work, sweeping the floors thoroughly before moving to scrub them on her hands and knees. It felt good to work, to have a purpose again. By midday, the house already looked better, and Fiona felt a sense of satisfaction she had not experienced in months. She went out to feed the chickens and collect eggs, finding a dozen in the nesting boxes. The chicken coop needed cleaning, which she added to her list of tasks. Behind the barn, she discovered a small garden that had been neglected, with a few late-season vegetables struggling to survive among the weeds. She spent an hour pulling weeds and watering the plants, coaxing them back to life. For lunch, she made herself bread and cheese from the supplies in the kitchen, then continued working. She washed the windows until they sparkled, mended a shirt she found hanging on a peg with a torn sleeve, and started a stew for dinner using vegetables from the root cellar and some beef she found in the cold box. When Yates returned as the sun was setting, he stopped in the doorway and stared. The house glowed with lamplight, the windows were clean, the floors were spotless, and the smell of beef stew filled the air. "I hardly recognize the place," he said, genuine amazement in his voice. "You did all this in one day. I told you I was not afraid of hard work." Fiona ladled stew into a bowl and handed it to him. "Sit down and eat while it is hot. You look exhausted." Yates sat and ate with the same appreciation he had shown at breakfast. When he finished, he said, "Fiona, I meant what I said last night. I know what it is like to have nothing. When I came west, I was running from a father who drank away everything we had and a town that looked at me with pity. I wanted to build something of my own, something nobody could take away. This ranch is that dream, even if it is struggling right now. I understand that better than you know, Fiona said softly. I came here with nothing because staying in Kansas City meant staying in a life that had become a prison. I need to build something too, a future that belongs to me. Yates looked at her across the table and something passed between them, an understanding, a recognition of kindred spirits. I am glad you are here, he said simply. Over the following weeks, Fiona settled into a rhythm at the ranch. She woke before dawn to make breakfast, packed lunch for Yates to take with him when he rode out to work, spent the days maintaining the house and garden, and prepared dinner in the evenings. The work was hard but satisfying, and she felt herself growing stronger, both physically and emotionally. Yates was gone most days from sunrise to sunset, working cattle, mending fences, and doing the dozens of tasks that kept a ranch running. But in the evenings, they ate dinner together and talked. Fiona learned about his childhood in Missouri, about the father who had beaten him and the mother who had died when he was 12. She learned about his dreams for the ranch, his plans to expand the herd and maybe start breeding horses for sale to the army. In turn, she told him about her life in Kansas City, about her mother who had died when she was young and her father who had been loving but weak, unable to resist the lure of cards and dice. She told him about the boarding house where she had worked, the men she had cooked for, miners and railroad workers who had been rough but mostly respectful. As September turned to October, the aspens on the mountainsides turned gold and the air grew crisper. Fiona repaired the curtains in the house, made new quilts from fabric scraps she found in a trunk, and preserved the last of the garden vegetables for winter. She learned to milk the cow Yates kept in the barn, to churn butter, and to bake bread in the finicky wood stove. One evening, about 3 weeks after her arrival, Yates came in from the barn and found Fiona sitting by the fire, mending one of his shirts. He stood in the doorway for a long moment, just watching her, and when she looked up, she caught an expression on his face that made her breath catch. "What is it?" she asked. Yates shook his head as if clearing his thoughts. "Nothing. I was just thinking how different this place feels now. It is a home again, not just a house." "I am glad," Fiona said, her heart beating faster. "I have not had a home in a long time." Yates crossed the room and sat in the chair across from her. "Fiona, I need to tell you something. Tomorrow I am taking the horses to town to sell. If I get the price I am hoping for, I will have enough to pay off my debt and have a little left over. But if I do not get what I need, I might lose the ranch." Fiona set down her mending. "Surely there is another option." "I have looked at every option. This is all I have left." He rubbed his face wearily. "I am telling you because if I lose the ranch, I will not be able to keep you on. I will make sure you have enough money to get settled somewhere else, and I will give you a reference that will help you find other work, but I wanted you to know what might happen." "How much do you need?" Fiona asked. 300 for the debt, plus another 100 for supplies to get through winter. 400 total. "And how much are the horses worth?" "If I get a fair price, 500. But buyers know when a man is desperate and they use it against him." Fiona was quiet for a moment, thinking. "Then we make sure they do not know you are desperate. We make them compete for the horses." "How do we do that?" "By making them think other buyers are interested. You do not sell to the first man who makes an offer. You say you are considering multiple offers and will decide by week's end." Men always want what they think someone else wants. Yates looked at her with surprise and something like admiration. "That might actually work. It will work. Trust me." Fiona picked up her mending again, her fingers working the needle with practiced ease. And if it does not, we will find another way. You are not losing this ranch." "Why do you care so much?" Yates asked quietly. "You have only been here a few weeks." Fiona looked up and met his eyes. "Because this is my home now too, and because I believe in you and what you are building here." And because she stopped, unsure how to finish that sentence. "Because why?" Yates prompted gently. "Because I have come to care about what happens to you," Fiona admitted, feeling her cheeks warm. "More than I probably should." The silence that fell between them was charged with unspoken feelings. Yates leaned forward, his elbows on his knees, his eyes never leaving her face. "I have been trying not to say anything because I did not want to make you uncomfortable or make you feel obligated in any way. But I need you to know that you have become important to me, very important. I think about you all day while I am working. I look forward to coming home in the evenings because I know you will be here. And when I think about losing the ranch, the thing that scares me most is not losing the land but losing you." Fiona set her mending aside and stood, crossing the small distance between them. She reached out and touched his face, feeling the rough stubble on his jaw. "You are not going to lose me. Or the ranch. We will figure this out together." Yates stood and took her hand in his, holding it gently. "You arrived here with no possessions, nothing to your name, but somehow, in just a few weeks, you have come to possess something more valuable than all the land and cattle in Colorado." "What is that?" Fiona whispered. "My heart," Yates said simply. "You possess my heart now, and that is worth more than gold." Fiona felt tears spring to her eyes at the raw honesty in his words. "Yates," he pulled her closer, his free hand coming up to cup her cheek. "You do not have to say anything. I just needed you to know how I feel. If you do not feel the same way, I understand, and it will not change anything between us. You still have a home here for as long as you want it." "I do feel the same way," Fiona said, her voice breaking slightly. "I've been trying not to admit it to myself because everything happened so fast, and I did not want to be foolish. But I have fallen in love with you, Yates Jefferson. I have fallen in love with your kindness and your strength and the way you never give up even when things are hard." Yates pulled her into his arms, holding her close, and Fiona rested her head against his chest, hearing the strong, steady beat of his heart. They stood like that for a long moment, neither speaking, just holding each other in the firelight. Finally, Yates pulled back just enough to look at her face. "May I kiss you?" "Yes," Fiona breathed. His lips met hers gently at first, tentative, as if he was afraid she might pull away. But Fiona leaned into the kiss, her hands sliding up to his shoulders, and Yates deepened the kiss, his arms tightening around her. It was a kiss full of promise and hope, a kiss that spoke of lonely nights ending and new beginnings starting. When they finally broke apart, both were breathing hard, and Yates rested his forehead against hers. "I have been wanting to do that for weeks." "So have I," Fiona admitted with a small laugh. They sat back down by the fire, this time with Fiona nestled against Yates's side, his arm around her shoulders. They talked late into the night, making plans for the horse sale, discussing the ranch's future, and sharing dreams they had not dared speak aloud before. The next morning they rode into Durango together, leading the string of horses behind them. Fiona wore her best dress, which was still threadbare but clean, and she had pinned her hair up carefully. Yates wore his good shirt and had shaved, looking every bit the successful rancher even if his pockets were empty. They set up in the corral by the livery stable, and soon men began to gather to look at the horses. Yates had bred good stock, strong animals with good temperaments, and there was genuine interest from several buyers. When the first man made an offer, Yates, remembering Fiona's advice, said calmly, "I appreciate the offer, but I am taking bids through the end of the week." I will let you know my decision then." The buyer looked surprised but nodded and walked away. A second buyer made a higher offer, and Yates gave him the same response. By afternoon, word had spread that Yates Jefferson had quality horses and was not desperate to sell, and more buyers appeared, each trying to outbid the others. Fiona watched from the side, proud of how Yates handled each negotiation with calm confidence. He knew the value of his animals and refused to be pressured into a quick sale. By the time the sun began to set, he had offers ranging from $400 to $550. "Take the $550, Fiona whispered to him when they had a moment alone. "That is more than you hoped for." "Are you sure? What if I wait and get a better offer?" "You have done well. Take the money while it is on the table." Fiona squeezed his hand. "Trust me." Yates nodded and found the man who had made the highest offer, a horse trader from Denver who wanted the entire string for his business. They shook hands, signed papers, and the trader counted out $550 in cash. Walking away from the corral with that much money in his pocket, Yates felt lighter than he had in months. He paid off his debt immediately, handing $300 to the unpleasant man who had threatened him in the stable weeks before. Then he bought supplies for the winter: flour, sugar, coffee, salt, cloth for new clothes, and tools he needed for the ranch. With the remaining money safely in his pocket, he found Fiona waiting by the general store and swept her up in a hug that lifted her off her feet. "We did it! The ranch is saved," Fiona laughed, happiness bubbling up inside her. "I never doubted you for a moment." "I doubted myself plenty, but you gave me confidence." Yates set her down but kept his arm around her waist. "Fiona Jenkins, I know this is fast, probably too fast by most people's standards, but life is short and I have learned not to waste time on things that matter. You matter to me more than anything. Would you consider becoming my wife?" Fiona's breath caught. She had hoped he might propose eventually, but she had not expected it today, in the middle of Durango's main street with people walking past. But somehow, it felt right. Everything about Yates felt right. "Yes," she said, her smile so wide it hurt her cheeks. "Yes, I will marry you." Yates kissed her right there in front of everyone, and Fiona did not care who saw. When they broke apart, he said, "Let us go see the preacher right now." "Right now." "Do you not want a proper wedding?" "I want to be married to you. Everything else is just details." Yates took her hand. "Unless you want a big wedding with all the trimmings." Fiona thought about it for all of 2 seconds. "No, I want to marry you today." They found the preacher at the small church on the edge of town, and he agreed to marry them immediately. Sheriff Coleman and his wife served as witnesses, the same sheriff who had given Fiona a silver dollar on her first day in Durango and told her the town was fair to those who worked hard. The ceremony was simple but heartfelt. Yates slipped a simple gold band on Fiona's finger, purchased hastily from the general store, and promised to love and cherish her for the rest of his days. Fiona promised the same, her voice strong and sure. When the preacher pronounced them man and wife, Yates kissed her with a tenderness that made Fiona's eyes well with tears. A month ago, she had arrived in Durango with nothing. Now she had a husband, a home, and a future brighter than she had ever imagined possible. They rode back to the ranch as the sun set, painting the Colorado sky in brilliant shades of pink and orange. Yates kept one arm around Fiona as they rode, holding her close, and she leaned back against him, perfectly content. That night, they consummated their marriage in the room that had been Yates's alone for so long. He was gentle and patient with Fiona, who had never been with a man before, and afterward they lay tangled together in the quilts, talking quietly and making plans for their future. "I want to expand the herd this spring," Yates said, his fingers tracing lazy patterns on Fiona's bare shoulder. Maybe buy another 100 head if we can afford it. And I want to build a bigger barn, one that can hold more hay for winter. I want to expand the garden and maybe get some fruit trees started, Fiona said. And I want to learn to ride better so I can help you with the cattle when you need it. I will teach you, Yates promised. You will be the best horsewoman in Colorado by this time next year. And maybe, if we are blessed, we will have a child by this time next year, Fiona added softly. Yates pulled her closer. I would like that. I would like a house full of children if you are willing. I am willing. Fiona kissed his chest, feeling completely safe and loved. I am willing to build a whole life with you, Yates Jefferson. The winter that followed was hard but happy. Snow fell deep in the mountains, and there were days when Yates could not leave the house to work. But those days were spent in comfortable companionship, with Fiona teaching Yates to cook better and Yates teaching Fiona to play chess on a board he carved from wood. They celebrated Christmas with a small tree Yates cut from the forest and decorations Fiona made from paper and ribbon. Their gifts to each other were simple but meaningful. Fiona gave Yates a new shirt she had sewn from fabric she bought with her wages, and Yates gave Fiona a music box he had ordered from Denver, knowing she loved music. As winter turned to spring, Fiona's suspicions were confirmed. She was pregnant. Yates received the news with joy, picking her up and spinning her around despite her protests that he should be careful. Careful, he laughed. Our child is the size of a pea right now. I think you can handle being spun around once. Still, you should practice being careful now, Fiona said, but she was laughing too. The pregnancy progressed smoothly through the spring and summer. Fiona continued to work, though Yates insisted she do less physical labor as her belly grew. He hired 2 new ranch hands with money they had saved, young men who needed work and were willing to learn. With their help, the ranch prospered. The cattle herd grew, the garden produced abundant vegetables, and Yates started breeding horses again. In October, exactly 1 year after Yates had proposed, Fiona gave birth to a healthy baby boy. The labor was long and difficult, with only a midwife from town to help, but when Fiona finally held her son in her arms, she felt a love so fierce it took her breath away. What should we name him? Yates asked, sitting beside the bed with tears in his eyes as he looked at his son. I was thinking James, Fiona said. James Jefferson, after your middle name. James Jefferson, Yates repeated, testing how it sounded. I like it. Hello, James. Welcome to the world, little man. Baby James proved to have a healthy set of lungs and a fierce appetite. Fiona spent the first months in a blur of feedings and diaper changes, but she had never been happier. Yates was a devoted father, getting up in the night to walk with James when he cried, changing diapers without complaint, and singing off-key lullabies that somehow soothed the baby to sleep. As James grew from infant to toddler, the ranch continued to thrive. Yates expanded the cattle operation and began selling horses to the army, just as he had dreamed. Fiona managed the household finances with a careful eye, making sure they saved money for the inevitable hard times that would come. 2 years after James was born, Fiona gave birth to a daughter they named Grace. She had her mother's green eyes and her father's dark hair, and from the moment she could walk, she followed her father everywhere, wanting to help with the horses and cattle. Life settled into a comfortable pattern. The children grew, the ranch prospered, and Yates and Fiona's love deepened with each passing year. They had their challenges, years when the weather was bad and the cattle prices were low, times when illness struck the herd or unexpected expenses arose. But they faced everything together, their partnership strong and their commitment unwavering. When James was 10 and Grace was 8, Fiona gave birth to twin boys, Samuel and Thomas. The house that had once seemed too big for one person now rang with the sounds of children's laughter and the chaos of a large family. Yates built an addition to the house, adding more bedrooms and a larger kitchen to accommodate their growing brood. The children grew up learning the value of hard work and the importance of family. James became an expert horseman like his father, while Grace surprised everyone by being better with the cattle than her brothers. Samuel showed an aptitude for numbers and helped his mother keep the ranch accounts, while Thomas loved working in the garden and became skilled at growing vegetables and fruits. One evening, when Fiona was 45 and Yates was 47, they sat on the porch watching the sun set over the mountains. Their children were grown now, James running his own ranch nearby, Grace married to a neighboring rancher, and the twins working as partners in a horse breeding business. "Do you remember the day you arrived in Durango?" Yates asked, taking Fiona's hand in his. "I remember everything about that day," Fiona said. "I remember being terrified and exhausted and not knowing what would happen to me. And then, I remember meeting a kind cowboy who offered me a place to stay with no expectation of anything in return. I knew the moment I saw you that you were special," Yates said. "I did not know we would end up here, with 4 children and more grandchildren than I can count on 2 hands, but I am glad we did." "So am I." Fiona leaned her head on his shoulder. "You told me once that I possessed your heart, and that was worth more than gold. But you possess mine too, and you always will. I love you, Fiona Jefferson. I have loved you from the moment you stepped down from that stagecoach with nothing but determination in your eyes. I love you too, Yates. Thank you for seeing me when I had nothing, for giving me a chance, and for building this beautiful life with me." They sat in comfortable silence as the stars began to appear in the darkening sky. The ranch that Yates had built with his own hands, and that Fiona had helped grow into something greater than either of them, had imagined stretched out before them. The cattle grazed peacefully in the pastures, the horses moved in their corrals, and in the distance, they could see the lights from their children's homes dotting the valley. It had been a hard life in many ways, full of challenges and obstacles that had to be overcome. But it had also been a good life, rich with love and family and purpose. Fiona thought back to that frightened young woman who had stepped off the stagecoach with nothing and could hardly believe how far she had come. "What are you thinking?" Yates asked. "I am thinking about how sometimes the worst moments in our lives lead us to the best things," Fiona said. "If my father had not died, if I had not lost everything, I never would have come to Durango. I never would have met you. And all of this," she gestured at the ranch, at the life they had built, "would never have existed." "I am glad you came to Durango," Yates said softly. "Even though I hate the circumstances that brought you here, I am grateful every day that our paths crossed. Me too." They stayed on the porch until the night grew cold, talking about the past and the future, sharing memories and dreams. When they finally went inside, Yates banked the fire in the fireplace while Fiona made tea. They had done these same small rituals thousands of times over the years, but they never grew old or tiresome. There was comfort in the familiar, in the knowledge that they would wake up tomorrow and do it all again. In bed that night, Fiona curled against Yates's side, her head on his chest, listening to his heartbeat. This was home, not the house or the land, but this man who had seen her at her lowest and had offered her hope, who had loved her when she had nothing to give but herself, who had built a life with her that was richer than any amount of gold or cattle or land. "You possess my heart," Fiona whispered into the darkness, echoing the words he had spoken to her so many years ago. "And you possess mine," Yates replied, his arms tightening around her. "Always and forever, Fiona. Always and forever." They drifted off to sleep wrapped in each other's arms, content in the knowledge that they had found something rare and precious. They had found true love, the kind that endured through hardship and celebrated in joy, the kind that grew stronger with each passing year rather than fading with time. The ranch that had nearly been lost to debt became a legacy that would pass to their children and grandchildren. The love that had started in desperation and grown in hope became a foundation that supported not just two people but an entire family. And the woman who had arrived with no possessions became the heart of a home filled with more wealth than money could ever buy. The wealth of love, family, and a life well lived. As the years continued to pass, Yates and Fiona grew old together, their hair turning silver and their movements becoming slower, but their love never diminishing. They celebrated 50 years of marriage surrounded by children, grandchildren, and even a few great-grandchildren, all gathered at the ranch to honor the couple who had built something lasting from nothing. James gave a toast that made everyone laugh and cry. My father once told me that my mother possessed his heart, and that was worth more than gold. As I have gotten older, I have come to understand the profound truth in those words. Wealth is not measured in money or land or possessions. It is measured in love, in family, in the legacy we leave behind. And by that measure, my parents are the richest people I have ever known. Everyone raised their glasses, and Fiona and Yates looked around at the faces of their descendants, seeing their own features reflected in different combinations, seeing the love they shared multiplied and passed on to a new generation. That night, after everyone had gone home and the house was quiet once again, Fiona and Yates sat on the porch as they had done countless times before. The stars were bright overhead, and the mountain air was cool and sweet. I could not have imagined this life when I was young, Yates said. I thought success meant having land and cattle and money in the bank. But I was wrong. Success is this, sitting here with you after 50 years, looking back on a life filled with love and meaning. I thought success meant security, a roof over my head and food on the table, Fiona said. But I was wrong too. Success is knowing that you built something that will outlast you, that the love you share creates ripples that go on and on. Do you have any regrets? Yates asked. Fiona considered the question seriously. No. I wish I had not lost my father the way I did, but I cannot regret the path that brought me to you. What about you? My only regret is that we do not have another 50 years ahead of us, Yates said with a smile. But I am grateful for the time we have had and the time we still have left. They stayed on the porch until Fiona began to doze in her chair, and Yates gently woke her and helped her inside. They moved slowly now, their bodies worn from a lifetime of hard work, but they still cared for each other with the same tenderness they had shown on their wedding night. In the morning, they woke to find fresh snow had fallen overnight, transforming the ranch into a winter wonderland. Yates built a fire while Fiona made breakfast, and they ate together in comfortable silence, each lost in their own thoughts but connected in the way that only comes from decades of shared life. As the winter wore on, Yates's health began to decline. He had lived a hard life, and his body was giving out, though his mind remained sharp and his spirit strong. Fiona cared for him with the same dedication she had shown in running the ranch, making sure he was comfortable and never alone. On a cold February night, with Fiona holding his hand and their children gathered around his bed, Yates Jefferson passed peacefully from this world. His last words were for his wife. "Thank you for saying yes all those years ago. Thank you for building this life with me. I love you, Fiona." "I love you too," Fiona whispered through her tears. "Go rest now, you have earned it." After Yates died, Fiona found it hard to be in the house without him. Every corner held memories, Every chair was empty without him sitting in it, but she was not alone. Her children visited daily. Her grandchildren came to stay. And slowly, she found a new rhythm to her life. She began writing down the story of how she and Yates had met and fallen in love, wanting future generations to know where they had come from. She filled pages with memories, with the struggles and triumphs, with the love that had sustained them through everything. When she finished, she gave copies to each of her children. "This is your inheritance," she told them. "Not the land or the cattle or the money, though those are yours too. This story is your real inheritance, the story of what love can build when two people are willing to work for it." Fiona lived 3 more years after Yates passed, and when she died peacefully in her sleep at the age of 75, she was buried next to him on a hill overlooking the ranch they had built together. The headstone was simple, bearing both their names and a single line. She possessed his heart, he possessed hers, and that was worth more than gold. The ranch continued to operate under James's management, and eventually it passed to his children. Each generation added their own improvements and their own stories, but they never forgot the foundation it was all built on. Two people who had met when one had nothing and the other had little, and who had created something extraordinary through love, hard work, and an unwavering commitment to each other. On the 100th anniversary of Yates and Fiona's wedding, their descendants gathered at the ranch for a celebration. There were over 200 people present, all connected by blood or marriage to that original union. The current matriarch, Yates and Fiona's great-great-granddaughter, read from the memoir Fiona had written, telling the story of a woman who arrived in Durango with no possessions, and a cowboy who saw beyond her circumstances to the person she was. As she read the final words, where Yates had told Fiona that she possessed his heart and that was worth more than gold, there was not a dry eye in the crowd. The love story that had started in desperation and grown into something beautiful had become the foundation for generations of happiness. Proof that the most valuable things in life cannot be bought or sold, but only given freely from one heart to another. The sun set over the Colorado mountains that evening, painting the sky in the same brilliant colors it had when Yates and Fiona had sat on the porch so many years before. The ranch spread out below, still beautiful, still productive, still a testament to what two people could build when they loved each other completely and worked toward a common dream. And if you listened carefully in the evening breeze, you might have heard the echo of laughter, of children playing, of a man and woman talking quietly on the porch, their voices full of love and contentment. The story of Yates and Fiona Jefferson had ended long ago, but the legacy they created continued, a living reminder that true wealth is measured not in possessions but in love, not in what we own but in what we give, and that sometimes the best things in life come when we least expect them, arriving with nothing but changing everything forever.